Hi, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of our Start for Free course tour, where you're getting a sneak peek into the actual course curriculum of FDN. My name is Elizabeth Gaines. I'm the course supervisor. It is my honor to be here with you again, having a wonderful romp through the mucosal barrier today. How exciting. And it is my honor also to introduce Reed Davis, the founder of Functional Diagnostic Nutrition.
Hey, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. We're going to get started right away. Just want to hope you guys got to see the adrenal primer yesterday because it was pretty cool, I thought. And it seemed like we got a lot of engagement with that. You guys are pretty excited, asking really good questions. We'll get through today as quick as possible too, so we'll leave time for questions and get you back to work or whatever it is you're doing. And then remember, these recordings are available. If today's your first day, let us know, and we'll make sure you get the recordings too. So anything else? And Brenda's here with us to watch the chat. If you have questions, just put them in chat. You don't need to use the Q&A special box thing there. That's good. And let us know where you're from too. Even though you did it yesterday, if you were here. I
We
will
always like
start.
to know who's in the house.
Who's in the house? Who's in the house?
Texas, Minnesota, Canada, Cape Cod, Northern Wisconsin, New Jersey, London, France, SoCal.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Remember, this is out of the actual FDN course. We have shortened it. We've taken out some slides that are just more than we can handle in an hour here, for your benefit, just so you can get an idea. So my contention has been almost from day one. You know, back 25 years ago, I also had heard that all disease begins in the gut, or all disease begins in a leaky gut, these kind of things. And I would contend that no, it doesn't. We've already gone over the stress cycle. We're going to do it again today real quick, but all disease probably doesn't begin in the gut, but it circles to it so much that it might appear that way because that's where some of the most extreme symptoms come from. And of course, people think symptoms are what's wrong. Symptoms are not what's wrong. For instance, this is what I call the wellness meter. And I don't know if you can see my picture along with the screen. Are both things showing up there for you? Okay. So
Yes,
I
they
used
are.
to stand from an audience, go, okay, this is my wellness meter. Here's no symptoms. And then you drop down. So let me just do it this way. Here's no symptoms. And here's what happens. So if I asked everybody in the audience, hey, how you doing today? Unless they had a particular symptom at that moment, they probably say, I'm doing fine, thanks, or something like that. And yet, so we think no symptoms is a state of health. And I'm here to say that no, it just means no symptoms. So what happens? When do people actually do something about their health? Well, typically, put that over there, when a symptom occurs. Now, you could talk about headaches or your itchy skin or you name the symptom. Here, I just chose low energy and fatigue because it's so common. And what do people do? Well, they get rid of the symptom. They just want to get back to where it's no symptom. So if after lunch you're feeling a little tired, you might grab a cup of coffee, you might take a shot of adaptogens or something. There's some safe and effective. Hey, don't use that word around here, Reed. Safe and effective. We don't want to hear about safe and effective, but there's some safe and reliable ways to get rid of symptoms that aren't all that harmful, unlike some drugs. But are you better because you got to here, back to here? No, I would contend that whatever made you low energy and fatigue is still there. There's still a cycle going on. So what happens is generally you get back to where it's worse. If all you ever do is treat symptoms, you're going to get worse. The symptoms will get bigger and bigger, and you have to get out a bigger and bigger symptom removal stick. Whip those things. So if you're in pain, sickness, you're just even more run down. What do? You try to get back, to where. And I've had one lady at this point here. She had migraines, and instead of getting all the way back to no symptoms, she got back to just what she called normal headaches. I said, there's no such thing as normal headaches. But anyway, so then what happens? You still aren't dealing with the underlying causes, conditions, and contributing factors, what we call it contributing to the metabolic chaos that is producing these symptoms. So then what? Well, you could end up with a diagnosed condition. Now you're kind of like, oh boy, I've been diagnosed. It's fibromyalgia, it's chronic fatigue, it's irritable bowel, it's, whatever it is. And then what? What's after that? Well, hate to tell you, folks. I don't know why you always laugh at this one, Elizabeth. But this is the downward spiral towards death, cell death. Let's say it's just your cells. Maybe it's not the whole person, okay? I'm not trying to be too dramatic. So it's at least cell death. Some cells are going to start dying. Then it's going to be really hard to get back to no symptoms. So what's our approach instead? Well, guess what? If here's low energy and fatigue, what's the opposite? What's on the other side of high energy? Like all the frickin' time. Like you just wake up, your feet hit the floor, you say your prayers, and you get to work or play or whatever it is. Do something useful and productive and purposeful in your life. So, but is that the ultimate goal? No, I would say that opposite of pain, sickness, and rundown is now not only do you have high energy, but your immune system's up to the point where every cell's protected. That's high function. That's as well as you can get, up to a point. I mean, we seek the 100%. Now, we don't find very many people who are perfectly functioning like that, but that's got to be the goal. So far, so good. So just to
Awesome.
repeat, it looks like this from top to bottom, conditions involved in the medical model, and note the downward spiral. People have no symptoms. They don't go to doctors till, guess what? This is actually a dangerous state. How many people have you heard of? Or just put in the chat box, yes. If you've ever heard of someone who was perfectly healthy dying of a heart attack, okay, they were fine. This is part of why I got in this business, because a friend of mine's dad, who was perfectly healthy, hell, we'd just been on a fishing trip. He died of a heart attack one morning. And so obviously he wasn't healthy.
We
So
got a lot of yeses in the chat box here, Reed.
thank you, thank you. So now after that, you get this low energy, fatigue, always feeling tired, tend to self-medicate, mostly caffeine. Who here is addicted to caffeine still? And it's okay if you are, there's no judgment going on here. It's just interesting to note sometimes. And if it's not caffeine, it could be something else. This, if it stays this way, it will drop to the lower level. Pain, sickness, run down. I was getting sick, has complaints, seeks medical help often on medication, because guess what? Self-treatment isn't, or the self-medication isn't working anymore. You need something stronger. Hey, doc, I've been, I want to get off this caffeine, but I'm really addicted to it. Oh, here, we got something for you. Whatever that might be, Adderall, they're prescribing it like candy, even to adults. And now you end up have a disease condition, something defined. And you might actually be a medical case, because if you've destroyed enough cells or tissues or organs or systems in your body, you got something that could actually get serious. And you end up with this poor prognosis. That means future's not looking too bright if you don't do something. Problem is that most people, what they do is cut the parts out, take stronger medication, try to maybe change jobs or go on vacation, but it doesn't work. And some cells die. That means no function in those cells. That's what sickness care leads to. So obviously this is a model to be avoided and to be aware that there is an alternative. And I would contend, at least Elizabeth will tell you, we're the ultimate alternative. Now here we're going to start at the bottom where it's no symptoms. Does that equal good health? You already know the answer, but it's a good starting point. So we've been asked, Elizabeth, this comes up for me all the time, and I know it does for you and all the mentors who work for you in delivering the course material. Hardly anyone comes to you with no symptoms, but sometimes they say, hey, look, I'm feeling okay. I just want to get to super healthy. Like I need to perform better in my job. I'm trying to get a raise. I'm trying to get a promotion. Or, I'm on a sports team and I want to be the top person in my position out there and all these sorts of things. So yes, if you look at my picture now, just briefly, a lot of people they're unwell and they want to get well. But now you take people who are well, no symptoms at this point, and they want to get super well or super performance. We would call it peak. They want to reach their peak, whatever that might be, whatever's genetically possible for them. They want to get there. So this is a system that we're talking about here that, yeah, it can turn unwell to well, but it can turn well to super well, like super efficient and on at every cell. So you get this abundance of energy as you continue to work on yourself. You get a really good immune system. Like you hardly ever get sick. You might know people like this. Then at some point, you can even reach a state where abnormal cells are immediately recognized by the body, and the body destroys them, keeping the cell integrity instead of cell death at the other end of the meter. And then at some point, the body's functioning, running perfectly as it can get. There are often genetic limitations. And it could be something like, well, Reed, you're never going to dunk the basketball because you're only 5'10", and you better get a ladder. But you get my point here. The upward spiral by the FDN opt-in model of self-care. That we talked about the opt-in model yesterday. Elizabeth went over it really well, or maybe it was the first day, but we've covered it. So let me give you a little diagram here that talks about what stress does to the body. Stress-induced hyperpermeability, because the topic for today was what? Mucosal barrier and gut function. So increased stress level throws your hormones out of balance. And generally, you're going to be in the sympathetic overload. You got a fight flight going on pretty good there. Your DHA and your cortisol are out of balance. The sex hormones are the next sort of domino to fall. And we see this on our lab reports. This is just in black and white, and it's accurate. It's as accurate as you can get on the cortisol to DHA. You're looking at the entire hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, all the hormones involved, which includes the sex hormones. So people with increased stress levels, if they don't soon resolve it, remember the meter, if you don't get back to something above no symptoms, it's going to keep happening. And so then what? What's the next domino to fall? Well, on our lab reports, secretory IgA, right here, SIGA, SIG-A, we call it SIG-A, it's secretory, being secreted by the cells in the lining of the gut. It's IgA, which is immunoglobulin A, which is it's a huge part of your immune system. You've all heard the gut is a big part of your immune system. Well, this is the ingredient that keeps it that way, and it does protect you. But with constant increased stress in what we call a catabolic state, add that to the slide, catabolic state, cortisol DHA is out of balance, well, SIG-A is going to be compromised. And we measure it. So we're measuring everything, and the dominoes are falling. Symptoms you might appear with would be gas, bloating, heartburn, indigestion, diarrhea, constipation, alternating diarrhea and constipation. That's a fun one. And because you have this lowered SIG-A, you end up with what's called a dysbiosis, which is the good and bad flora. And this is measurable. It's on our lab reports. We see it day in and day out with our clients, who, by the way, are being told, oh, you just need some antacids or something to relieve that. Here's something for that diarrhea. They're not going to try to fix the problem. And that's the problem we have with that system. So again, in alternative medicine, we look at the SIG-A, we see it, we see the dysbiosis, the imbalance between good and bad flora. And of course, then you'll have poor digestion, because those good biota are needed to break down proteins. Proteins are what are the substrate for, obviously, they're amino acids that make your neurotransmitters and how you feel. So you come up now, you got sex hormone imbalances. You know what that feels like, especially the women. You've got bloating, heartburn, gas, indigestion, all those things. Now you've got nutritional deficiencies, and it just goes wild from there. You end up with overgrowth in that gut of bacteria or funguses, and then you might get parasites. You get increased food sensitivities for sure. Now you don't know what to eat anymore. You got nutritional deficiencies. You're trying to cram in some good organic, homegrown, whatever it is. We grow our own food out here. But guess what? When that happens, you get this compromised digestion, you get the overgrowth, and you end up with leaky gut, basically, and liver congestion. Uh, Inflammation becomes the norm for that person. And guess what that does? It drives the need for more cortisol. So now you're busting your adrenals down. You're saying, hey, I need more cortisol because that's a natural painkiller and anti-inflammatory. That is among its main job of regulating blood sugar, especially in the brain. You know, it helps you produce blood sugar for energy and things and for maintenance of life and thinking and getting through your day, but it also is an anti-inflammatory and painkiller. That's why you feel worse at nighttime, because you don't have as much cortisol. It's on a circadian rhythm. So this is what is the we call it stress-induced hyperpermeability, and it's a very vicious cycle where if you're only treating the symptoms, trying to get back to no symptoms, if you don't have the lab work, we call it intelligence gathering. If you haven't gathered your intel, so we would invite anyone on the call today to make any comments they want or ask any questions they want. I'm not done yet. I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth here in a minute, but I just want to say how critical this is. Matter of fact, the labs we would run would include a stress and hormone panel, a metabolic wellness panel, mucosal barrier assessment, which is what Elizabeth's going to do in a sec, go through the anatomy and physiology, biochemistry of that for all you nerdy, geeky ones. And we also run GI pathogen screening, food sensitivity testing, and a special test to determine the absolute best diet for you, or at least where to start. So we have people follow a personalized, highly individualized DRESS that's diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, supplementation program, just for health success. It's the ultimate opt-in self-care health model, whether you just want to work on yourself or you want to learn this so that you can take your clients through it so that they get better and they recommend other people to you. Elizabeth, I'm turning it over to you.
Awesome. So for all of you nerdy, geeky ones out there, you are my family. So let's talk about the mucosal barrier anatomy. So first of all, a mucous membrane is where the inside of the body meets the outside of the body. So where the outside world is intersecting with the interior of the body, you're going to have a mucous membrane. That's happening in our eyes, in our nasal passages, in our mouth, all the way down our esophagus, in our small intestine, in our genital tract. Like this is where our bodies are open to the outside world. And so these barriers serve as a sort of protective measure for what should get in, what should get out. How does all that work? So let's go to the, yep. So we're going to focus when we talk about the mucosal barrier in the small intestine. We're not necessarily worried about these other mucosal barriers that we just talked about in the rest of the body in terms of our testing and how the gut works. So we're going to focus now on the small intestine. And so the intestinal mucosal barrier has a couple of jobs to do in a healthy body. One, it's going to allow nutrition to pass through to the hepatic portal system. And that's sort of where the lining of the small intestine is saying, do I think this is food? If so, I'm going to absorb it through and then allow the immune system to double check my work and then allow the liver to double check my work. And then we're going to pass that nutrition out to the bloodstream into general circulation. But it should not allow offensive particles into the general circulation. So the intestinal mucosal barrier is intelligent. It has this innate intelligence to know this is food, this is good for me, this is a pathogen, this is bad, and we just want to keep it all moving on out to leave the body through the large intestine, colon, feces tract. So it's really important that the mucosal barrier be in really good shape so that it's making good decisions, so that that intelligence can work to our benefit to make sure that it's only the good stuff that's getting in. Go ahead, Reed.
Yeah, I just want to make a quick comment here, and thanks. Great job, Elizabeth. It says here it's necessarily thin and somewhat fragile. It is, can get very fragile. It can actually disappear, what they call dry gut, but it could also get overly thick. So it just varies from person to person. That's why you need to test and find out what it is. An overly thick mucosal barrier would not be good either. And I love this expression. You've seen dogs drink dirty water, but you can't. Why? Because they have much more robust mucosal barriers than we do. It's because they're animals, and God must have known they're going to drink dirty water.
So just to talk a bit about the structure of the gut, we talk so much about the gut, but what's really involved there? So we start with I'm going to start with the villi. So the villi are these finger-like projections that you see here in the diagram on that side of the slide. And they are really flexible, and they are grabbing nutrition out from the gut lumen, which is like this little river that's flowing through. Now, on top of the villi are these little cells, and they have microvilli on top, so like the little hairs. And I think of this a lot like the balloon guy outside of the used car lot, where he's sort of like flowing in the breeze and he's moving around. You want that guy to be sort of like fully inflated, and you want him to be really agile and moving around well. And you want those little hairs on his head to be sticking up so that he can really get into the lumen and pull down the nutrition as it's going through. So then, so then we have what's called the epithelium. And this is that sort of layer that's on top of the villi, microvilli, that is made up of enterocytes and enteroendocrine cells, the goblet cells and the stem cells, all of that structure of making up that barrier that's going to decide whether we're going to pull this particular thing through. Is it food, or is it a pathogen and it needs to keep on moving? So the villi have in between them these valleys. They are the finger-like projections, but they have these valleys in between them. And these are called the crypts. And the crypts play a very important role. This is where that mucosal layer that Reed was just talking about, that determines whether we have dry gut or whether we don't, it's hanging out here in the valleys, and it's very protective. That's where the commensal flora are hanging out. They're hanging out in that mucosal layer that is protected by those crypts. And a lot of important things happen in the crypts. So for example, enzymes are released from there. One in particular, DAO, that this test that our mucosal barrier assessment looks at to see whether or not we're in an inflammatory state. And then underneath that, now we're into the immune layer called the lamina propria. So this is underneath that very thin layer of cells that is determining, is this food and I should pull it through, or should it keep on moving? Now, the lamina propria, being the immune layer, is the check and balance here. So the immune layer gets to decide, do I concur with what the enterocytes allowed through? Do I think that's food? Do I think that's nutrition? Or do I think that's an invader? So the immune layer here, the lamina propria, is incredibly important to be able to trap things that made it through the first layer and not allow those to proceed to the bloodstream, where they would then be distributed throughout the body. So within the lamina propria, we've got blood vessels, we've got lacteals, which are going to move the fat that is absorbed through the digestive system throughout the body to where it needs to go. We've got nerves, and then we've got the submucosa and the musculature that's sort of moving the whole system along in the gut. So that's sort of the overview of the gut anatomy.
That's a great overview of the villi. structure, not shown on this big graphic here, but shown in this little one over to the right. On top of these little cells, these enterocytes, which is interesting, there's only one layer of cells on the villi, one layer of cells. It's very fragile. And on those cells are these little tiny hairs called the microvilli, which also help with the swaying in the breeze and the moving, the peristalsis type action that is moving food from one end to the other, from the duodenum, where it comes out of the pyloric valve, from the stomach, all the way through to the anus, really, and where it's exited. There's a better sort of view of all this, because not shown is the nerves and things. So here's a little better one for you to go a little more detail here.
Excellent. Yep. So now we're going to really talk about the lamina propria. So this immune layer, the lamina propria, is a layer of loose connective tissue. And that really makes up the mucosa and the mucosal barrier. And it contains arterial and venous blood vessels, lacteals, and nerves. It also has glands for mucus and serous secretions. So when we say secretory IgA, for example, this is where it's coming from. It's being secreted out from the lamina propria layer into the gut lumen side to sort of do its work. So we know that it's rich in immune cells and known as lymphocytes, including the IgA and the B cells. B cells are that sort of response to the non-self antigens and pathogens. And they produce antibodies to neutralize bacteria. So they're really able to come in and say like, oh, that's not us, that's an invader. And they then respond to the call of SIG-A to say like, oh, hey, come here and neutralize this thing. So then we've all heard about zonulin. Zonulin is released to flush the garbage and the immune complexes back into the gut lumen. So we want that mucosal barrier to be tight, for those tight junctions to be tight. But when it's not, when we've got damaged enterocytes that allow pathogens or food that's too big to get into the immune layer, then the lamina propria says, oh, hey, this is an invader, and it's going to neutralize it. But it can't hang out there. It's sort of in this state of paralysis, like a limbo state, where it's like, well, you can't go to the bloodstream and you can't stay here. So you've got to go back to the lumen. And that's where the lamina propria will sort of knock on the back of an enterocyte and say, hey, could you just open the tight junction real quick so I can flush this thing out from the immune layer back into the lumen so that it will then exit the body.
In a perfect world, yeah. So there's even more detail.
Excellent. So when we're talking about this intestinal submucosa, this is the support mucosa layer. So it joins the mucosa to this underlying smooth muscle. It contains blood vessels, lymphatic vessels, and nerves for the transport of nutrients and dietary fats. It is really responsible for gut motility, defense, and immunity. I don't really want to get into the details here. I don't think we need them for this particular lesson.
I know how you feel about that. Yeah. So I'll just say that back to this SIG-A, because this is what we measure. So the mucosal barrier is like your second skin. I've heard some old time doctors talk about it like you got your outside skin and then you've got the inside skin, kind of like the hole of a donut. You know, the outside is one thing, but the hole is different. So it's 80% of your immune system. It's absolutely incredible. And here's an actual microscopic slice showing some things going on here. But these are the villi, and the microvilli, even at this magnification, are still invisible. It's just they're just too tiny. But SIG-A is the most abundant immunoglobulin in the body, which is a defense substance. First line of defense against ingested pathogens, as it is made in the lamina propria, and migrates through epithelial cells into the gut lumen, which is where all the food and stuff is, and becomes part of the mucoid layer. Remember I said that mucoid layer could be thin from one way it downward spirals, or it could be really super thick, depending on the type of problems you have and the environment inside that lumen, that kind of a thing. But this is back to the stress here. Suppressed by elevated cortisol to DHA ratio. Basically, elevated cortisol, you're in a catabolic state. Your body's breaking down. One of the first things that breaks down is this immunoglobulin A. The secretion of that can be greatly reduced. Now you're not immune anymore. Now stuff coming down the pipes that a healthy gut would reject, as Elizabeth pointed out, it would say, hey, you guys just keep moving, and end up being excreted. Well, this can really be accentuated when it's been going on for a long time, and now you don't have just have a dysbiosis. You've got actual bugs, like measurable, detectable bacteria, overgrowth, biofilms. You've got all kinds of things going on. But we really want to talk now about leaky gut, and you can go on from here.
Yep. I just want to go back to SIG-A for just a second. Sometimes I like to think about SIG-A like the bouncer at the bar door. Like it's SIG-A's responsibility to say like who is going to be well behaved and respectful and obey the rules, and who is going to be rowdy and out of hand and shouldn't come into the bar. So when we're in this situation where SIG-A is suppressed by cortisol, it's sort of like the bouncer is in the next room taking a nap and anybody can come into the bar. Or when we've got this really inflammatory situation in the gut and the immune system is on high alert, it's like that bouncer is getting bum rushed by a mob, and he's got a really itchy trigger finger and could well shoot a friendly, at which point now you've got a food sensitivity you didn't have, or an allergy you didn't have before, or an environmental sensitivity you didn't have, or maybe even down the road, autoimmunity.
Yeah, good one.
So this slide is talking about the liver as an immune system organ. So the hepatic portal system is going to drain blood from the stomach, the small intestines, the large intestines, the spleen, and the pancreas, all into the liver. So once it's come through the small intestine, the enterocyte said, yes, that's food. It went down into the lamina propria. The lamina propria said, yes, that's appropriate. Now it dumps into the hepatic portal system to go down to the liver, where the liver gets to be the last sort of check and balance on the system to say, yep, that's great, or no, that's a toxin. It's not going to go into general circulation. So substances include wanted and unwanted load from the intestines, including food and nutrition, but also antigens, immune complexes, toxins, xenobiotics, and it recirculates liver products too. It's sort of like a closed loop. Go ahead, Reed. And then the last part of the digestive system is the colon. The colon is going to extract water and salt from solid wastes before they're eliminated from the body. So this is where you get large intestine bacterial fermentation of unabsorbed material. So for example, in the small intestine, we're breaking things down, we're absorbing that food. But by the time it gets to the large intestine, the small intestine has passed on it and said, nope, this needs to go out of the body. And so now it's the large intestine's job to really break it down so that it can exit the body effectively. So it's really not there to play a role in the absorption of food or nutrients, but it is going to play a role with water and sodium. And it's also part of the immune system. So go ahead, Reed.
Yeah, good one. Good. Go in here.
Awesome. So we've got all kinds of things that can go wrong when we've got deficient SIG-A. So, the list of it is all right here. But of course, all of these are the result of, as well as being contributors to metabolic chaos. So as FDNs, we're not going to worry about all of the named conditions on this list. We are going to worry instead about all of the healing opportunities that our labs show us and all of the healing opportunities that the lifestyle shows us. And that is what we are going to work on. And I think that brings us, we could go on, Reed, or do you think we should stop here for questions? Let's just check out the questions right now and see. Could you please say more on the various way that the liver serves as an immune system organ? So it's really there to help decide on what is good, bad, ugly, unwanted for what's going into general circulation. So it has to be able to also identify those pathogens that made it through into the liver. So that's one of the ways it works as an immune system organ.
Hey, sorry, Elizabeth. I had a gardener come up to my window with a blower blowing the windows down. You know, it was pretty aggravating. I hope it didn't
No worries.
much. I took care of
No
that.
worries. Yep.
Yeah. This
I
is,
was
yeah. I heard you take a question after this slide. The diseases don't matter to us very much because some of these are actual medical conditions and some are just labels for what I call what's really happening. You know, well, what's really happening? We just gave you some anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry around what's really happening, regardless of what you want to name it. These are, this is what I think is partly wrong with standard medicine is that they pick one thing, whereas it's really an entire ecology and community of all kinds of activity. There's a lot of moving parts. And to just pick one thing and label it and treat that one thing actually doesn't work very well. It just almost keeps you trapped in another cycle, which is diagnosis and treatment cycle. Now, some of these are cancers, so you need oversight. Don't for 1 minute think that an FDN practitioner is going to be able to resolve every problem that a person has, but we can certainly prevent a lot of them. And if people do have these conditions, really important to understand you still need FDN. Why? Because you want to work around the edges of it. We work on improving function, improving function, improving function. And this is really critical. I have to say this here. Listen up to this. When is it good to have an FDN and when is it good to have a doctor? Okay, and why, first of all, we get along with them really well because we don't try to take their jobs.
Let's try again.
We don't try to take their jobs from them or anything like that. They've got their jobs. Their job is to save lives. So here's the definition. When the downward spiral, let's say neoplastic lymphoma, that's a downward spiral that's pretty contracted. You can die from that. So when the downward spiral is really contracted, then the observations we make with our testing can't really be capitalized on. You got to save the person's life first, get them out of the woods, get that life jacket on them and get them out of the deep water over to the edge of the pool, where then the effects of what we do are so helpful. And not just in terms of relief care, but the true corrective care that people need. And so that's why I say this here. All of these are the results of metabolic chaos. They also contribute to metabolic chaos. The real condition for us is just called metabolic chaos. So we don't treat any of these things specifically. We just treat the person using non-specific application of healing principles. Now, we haven't gone over in the Dress for Health Success program very much, which is our protocols. Right now, we're just teaching some things about the investigation. What's it like to be a good health detective and figure out what's really wrong? And so I'll just do the first slide here. Because we just showed you normal. We always like to look at, well, what's normal? How's it supposed to go? What's the typical thing? But with life, here we have mucosal barrier problems in a toxic, stressful world. And in the FDN course, we go over things very thoroughly, and we go over them over and over. So we try to add another layer with each review of a topic or anatomy or part of the physio, whatever it is. So, and we add layers to it. So what we have here is changed intestinal permeability, bad thing. We have contributors to that form of metabolic chaos. It could be nutritional deficiencies, things in your lifestyle, infections, of course, stress and emotions. Oh yeah, how you feel and think, things that have happened to you that day or that week, or it could be 10 years ago, can affect how your body functions. And what you end up with is food allergies and malnutrition and dysbiosis and toxic overload, which is what most people want to immediately treat. And so I think this is a pretty good overview. And now we are going to finally get to look at that microvilli. You want to take this one?
Absolutely. So now that we've talked about what a healthy microvilli is doing, let's talk about what happens when there is constant exposure to toxins, to pathogens that sort of hook on to these microvilli and blunt them. So the microvilli are sometimes referred to as the brush border. They are there to excrete enzymes and to help sort of facilitate the pulling in of the nutrients from the gut lumen. But when they get blunted, then they stop doing that. There is no more ability to release enzymes. So digestion gets compromised. So we get the low enzymes, we get lactose intolerance, we get reduced substances that micelize fats and oils. So we get poor fat and oil assimilation. We get stools where there might be floating because there's a large fat content that hasn't been digested. And we start seeing malnourishment and compromised immunity because we're not able to break down and digest food as robustly as we once were.
Yeah, it's just a beautiful thing. And I love all these different graphics. I pulled these off the internet in different places and stolen from other people's presentations and stuff. But here we have the beautiful look. I love this where you've got the epithelial cells, single layer of cells on our villi with the brush border finally showing. And it's really important. It produces also, besides what you said, the micellizing factors that help break down fat. Now, some fat is absorbed through the in the normal hepatic circulation, some small fats. Larger, so this black line here, that's the the blood vessels around there. One side is bringing the blood, the other side is taking away the blood. So there's actually small, teeny tiny little arteries, and then teeny tiny little veins as well, all throughout this little teeny tiny microscopic villi. But also inside of it, I love talking about this lacteal. That's what absorbs fat and the big fats. So some go into hepatic circulation, but most go directly into the lymphatic system through this big lacteal, big relative to the size of the villi. And it's really cool how that works. And that means that we actually have some supplements. This is a total side note, nerdy thing. We have some supplements where we actually use that lacteal to deliver the product into the system without going through the liver. We can avoid hepatic circulation because the liver changes everything. Liver is going to try to purify and detoxify and change. It's going to try to manufacture something out of that supplement that we use a sneaky little way of getting it into the lacteal. It's really quite remarkable. And so I just had to throw that in there because it's nerdy and people like that stuff.
I love nerdiness. Yes. So next up, once the microvilli have become blunted and are being damaged, next is the villi themselves. They go through this process called villus erosion. So they get stamped down and shortened, making them less effective at being able to pull nutrients down from the lumen, but also the crypts in between them get flattened out and blunted. So now that really nice mucus layer that was in there protecting the commensal bacteria and protecting all of the functions that are happening in the crypts is also then blown away. And that makes it more likely that we have this condition called dry gut that Reed was describing earlier. So having the villi flattened down means that we're not able to absorb nutrients as effectively. We definitely have compromised digestion and nutrient absorption, but also we now don't have those good bacteria. There's no place for them to hang out and be safe and do their job. So villus atrophy is another name for this, where the villi are not only stamped down and shortened, but they no longer have that flexibility to sort of move around and do their jobs well. Crypt hyperplasia is that name for when the crypts are flattened out and they have no protection anymore from nice, robust, tall villi. From this, we get maldigestion, malabsorption, malnutrition. We get deficiencies across all areas of function that are relying on proper nutrition to do their jobs well. We have reduced amino acid-based neurotransmitters. So then you might start to see some emotional symptoms show up, maybe depression or anxiety or inability to sleep coming from the neurotransmitters that can no longer be built. So left unchecked, this is going to lead to hyperpermeability, otherwise known as leaky gut, if it's not there already. So this is one of the reasons that we measure diamine oxidase, or DAO, on our assay. This is a very important measure for the lumen side of the mucosal barrier. How healthy is it in there on the lumen side? Because the DAO are made in the crypts, so if DAO starts to be low, then we know we've got microvilli damage, which comes first, then villi damage, which comes second, and then crypt hyperplasia.
I love that measurement.
It's great. Yep. I think we can.
So there's another thing there on the pill camera view. You're looking at a little bald spot here where the villi are gone, and it's just the person's going to have symptoms, guaranteed.
Yeah.
There you go.
So now we get to intestinal permeability, this thing that we all hear about, leaky gut. This is sort of the last step. So permeability is movement across the gut wall by either transcellular diffusion, and that means that the enterocytes are pulling things through the cell body. That is their natural intelligence at work to say, yes, I like you, come on through, or no, I don't like you, you cannot come through. Or paracellular uptake, which is happening between the cells. So either one of those are possible. So zonulin family of peptides are protein molecules that regulate the opening and closing of those tight junctions. So we want a gut where those tight junctions are tight, where it leaves it entirely up to those enterocytes, whether or not they want to pull something through down into the lamina propria. But what happens is that as those enterocytes get damaged, now there's a hole. There's an enterocyte-sized hole in the mucosal barrier, and things come through that hole. So now the lamina propria is reacting. It is sequestering that thing that was coming through that shouldn't have come through, usually in a histamine bubble, which we'll talk about in later lessons. I don't know if we're getting there on this lesson, but that histamine reaction can't go to the bloodstream and it can't stay in the lamina propria. It's got no place to go. So this is where zonulin comes in to open up a specific tight junction and let out that garbage back into the lumen. But of course, what happens there is that the open tight junction isn't regulated. So it can let things come in from the lumen with no ability to stop that, just as well as they're coming out of the lamina propria. So now more things come in, more zonulin has to be called upon to open more tight junctions, to flush out more things, and this is a vicious cycle. So higher levels, oh, sorry, go ahead, Reed.
I was going to say that I'd like a show of hands for people who do like the nerdy, geeky stuff They like the detail, they like going into it. Or would you prefer just overviews on this? And because you're going to take the course anyway, because this is really getting into the what might be considered to be the weeds to someone. Like if you're here just for your own health, this might be more than you really need to know. Trust the person you work. If they're an FDN practitioner, they know this stuff. They understand that leaky gut, how it works, what stage it might be in, and if it's invoked the humoral response. In other words, even at this point here, where you've got a little intestinal permeability, you can repair that. But when it gets to the point where you've got autoimmune, now it's in the bloodstream. Instead of just going through the liver and being purified, now it's in the bloodstream and it's going throughout your whole body. And the immune system gets overloaded, it gets tricked. And besides secretory IgA, there's lots of other parts of the immune system. And it will create a lot of inflammation, a lot of problems. You could have almost any problem. You could have bad skin, migraine headaches, asthma. You could have all of these things that we've seen be completely overcome. In other words, repaired, restored, back to normal. People with migraines, people with all kinds of skin conditions, all kinds of asthma and different things like that, all kinds of irritable bowel and chronic distress. Just restore it when you know what's going on. When you've done the lab work and you see the downward spiral, you've got the cortisol, DHEA, you got the sex hormones, you got the secretory IgA, you got the zonulin, which we just talked about. We've got the DAO, we've got histamine, other things, and then we haven't even talked about the microbiome and the GI pathogen screening and things like that, and the food sensitivities. So we definitely check people out for stress. We look for toxins in their environment, their household cleaning products, their personal care products, a new car smell we talked about yesterday, which is very toxic. Then there's the pathogens, there's foods that you're sensitive to, and there's drugs. God forbid anyone's taking drugs. And then there's these worse than pathogens or these infections that don't seem to want to go away. They could even be viral. And so you've got all this damage going on. And I just jumped in here because we're going to run out of time. I want to save a few minutes for questions. You've got normal tight junctions, which we went over pretty thoroughly, how it's supposed to be, how it's designed perfectly. We were given this amazing gift of the protection from the outside environment, including all the germs and bugs and dirt and stuff that might end up in our mouths and going into our stomachs. But then we've got what happens when you've got more than the body can bear. And from today's environment, especially with the toxins, we've got millions and millions and millions of people who are in this state, and yet they're really just taking care of the symptoms. They'll treat, oh, take this for your diarrhea, take this for your gas, take this for your bloating, take this for your sex hormone imbalances, take this for what's tiring you out and fatiguing you and giving you brain fog. So there's all this, take this for that. And we really, really have spent 25 years dissecting and sorting out what's really wrong so you don't just mask it. That's the whole point. Now, there's other lessons here that we just don't have time to go through. We go really into tremendous detail of what's going on. And I have, again, not only done this 25 years, Elizabeth's been with me like for 6 or 8 or 10 or whatever it is, long time. And we get this, and you can get this too. If you're a practitioner listening, it's not, this looks difficult. It's not that difficult. You can sort it out because we go A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There is a downward spiral, and you can follow the downward spiral. You can follow how the dominoes are falling by learning how to do the right lab work. And it's really a remarkable, we look at lab work, we see the ratios between these things. We call that an index. And it's really fun. You're like the best health detective on the planet. You're the one that can run these labs for your clients so that you can teach them what to do to reverse it. Pretty much they've lived themselves into these serious problems. They can live themselves out of it if it hasn't gone too far. If it's gone too far to where the downward spiral is very contracted, as I said a few minutes ago, well, that's what you go see a doctor for, and they can use things. They've got tricks in their black bag that will relieve relieve the suffering, and save their life. Now, then what? They still have to repair. They still have to get better. They still need the FDN approach of coaching up function. So even though we run a lot of lab work, we never treat the paper. Every test is interpreted relative to a person, a unique individual, must be correlated with their symptoms and history. I've been to physicians who never asked me a single question about my complaint. They just said, here's your test results and here's what we're going to do. And it's really, I think, frustrating. I think it's why people are looking for alternatives. So we identify this entire constellation of healing opportunities with multiple labs and connect the dots and create a customized lifestyle epigenetic program for each individual, which when followed correctly, which is where anyone here a health coach, could you just put a yes, I'm a health coach in there? And or if you have health coaching skills, whatever. So it isn't here, take this for 3 months and come back. It's here's some instructions and some guidelines and some recommendations. Let's work together for 3 months. That's how FDNs work and what makes us all that different. So I know we don't have much time. I think do we have some other programs coming up for this series that they could attend and that sort of a thing? Even Brenda, or if you know.
Brenda, can you speak to that?
Hi, yes. So we actually have our next event coming up on Monday, November 4th, and that is at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time, 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, and that will be the 5 Pillars workshop where we'll actually have Elizabeth back on to explain the FDN framework with our COO and also FDN, Brandy Buskow.
Yeah, right. So on Monday you get Elizabeth back with Brandy, who is very, very experienced FDN practitioner. She actually runs the company too, but she's an amazing, she'll geek out with you all day long if you want to. I try to give the higher overview most of the time so you know what you're doing, so you feel total confidence in taking on clients, charging them for your services, and then working with them so that they get results. This is a results-driven way of thinking. It's alternative to standard medicine, of course. And with those results, you're going to get referrals. Now, I don't know how many of you just love blogging and vlogging and posting on social media and writing up stuff and taking silly pictures of what you had for dinner yesterday and putting that on there. I don't do any of that stuff. What I depend on is referrals. Referrals will fill your practice, but you have to get results to get referrals. If people are coming to you and then moving down the road eventually to someone else, they're not going to refer anyone to you. When you can be the last person they need to see, when you can educate them to the point where they're in charge of their own health instead of putting their health in someone else's hands, that's when you get referrals. I know because I've done it and I've trained thousands of FDNs to do it. We have over 1,000 members who belong to our professional alumni group. So not everyone who takes the FDN course becomes a professional. They might just work on themselves. They might work on their families. And that's good enough for me. That's worth the price of admission, just doing that. But the fact that you get to turn this into your MO for your practice and get results and get the referrals and all the satisfaction that comes from that. Listen, go back and listen to day one. I told a couple of stories of my early experiences, which were so rewarding. They still send chills up my spine and make me feel warm and fuzzy all over. Because when you've helped a lot of people, Elizabeth, you finalize that with how you've had success.
Yeah, so it's really satisfying when you can take a person who's like, I've got all of these crazy symptoms and I don't know what's causing those symptoms, but I just do the method. I run the tests, I see the healing opportunities, I look at the lifestyle of that person and figure out where we can improve that. And then they get better. They get better. Those wild symptoms that I don't know where they're coming from. They could come from a food sensitivity, or they could come from leaky gut, or they could come from hormone imbalance, or they could come from those particular deficits crashing into each other and creating other deficits. But the beauty of this method is that I don't have to know in order to have a positive influence on those on those symptoms and on those upstream factors that are causing those symptoms. I just have to do the method.
Yeah, trust in the method because it works. Now, if it's okay with you, Brenda, is someone using the Zoom room next year? Can I spend a few minutes? For anyone who wants to go, if you just allotted 1 hour, that's fine. Even you, Elizabeth. I'm going to stay on and answer a couple of these questions. I don't like going over, but that's what I'm going to do, okay?
Great.
A lot of health coaches here I see, and it's hard for me to go all the way back. But the last few questions were really good ones. We have an NBC HWC health coach, RN, fantastic. We have so many licensed professionals as well. Sarah, and how many tests are available to practitioners in the UK? All of them. That's a great question because there's different ways to skin the cat. There's different tests for the hormones. There's different tests for GI screening. There's different tests for food sensitivities, and we'll teach them. We're in all these countries, and someone also I noticed from Ethiopia, you can take the training, and we'll help you sort out what's available locally. Right now, you'd be the first one in Ethiopia, but guess what? We're in 50 countries, so make it 51. Join, get the training, and remember this: most of us work remotely. So when COVID happened and shut the rest of the world down, didn't shut down any FDNs because we already work from home. Haha, can't send me home. I already work from home. So our business has boomed because people are at home, and what did they start focusing on? Their health. So during times of whatever's going to happen in the future, we're prepared to be very successful helping people, and it will do more than pay the bills, believe me. Now, so UK, yeah, fantastic. Getting referrals, lab partnership. Oh, good, Elizabeth. Thank you for that. Yeah, we like I said, we're in 50 countries. It's harder to do FDN in some countries because of the lab access. But you can start a practice. I have people in Australia. Most of their clients live in America. It's weird, but that's how it goes because they're working remotely. That's kind of what I was alluding to a few minutes ago. And there are replays for all of this. Insurance is not hard. In the UK, here in the States, we have a company we refer you to, but you can pick anyone you want. We don't get anything for that. We just like them because they give good service and they're very reasonably priced. It's less than $200 a year for our practice insurance, what we call professional liability. And so in the UK, you probably have to join an association to get that insurance. And we'll tell you what those associations are before you get through the course. Brenda says, don't forget to attend the 5 Pillars workshop. There's a link to that there. Work with any conditions such as pandas. Yes, it does, Danny. What I would say is that's a diagnosis. It's legit. That's a real condition. You need medical oversight. But if you want to reverse it, medical will never do that because it doesn't attempt to do that. That's not its purpose. Its purpose is to relieve the symptoms. And they do a good job with the different therapies and medications and things. But it's not good enough. It's not going to reverse anything. That's what the DRESS program is. The DRESS program is guided by our lab work. It's alternative labs. It's complementary, it's integrative, and it's part of functional medicine. But our view of it is very alternative. Like, hey, instead of diagnosing whatever, any diagnosis, Danny, why don't we figure out what's really wrong in major functions in the body and fix it? And then see where the chips fall. That method will outperform the other method. And so, yes, Suzanne, we've got the UK. We got the UK dialed in. UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, of course. Pretty strong there. The person from Ethiopia, we're going to have to work on that one. But we have people in Mexico. Matter of fact, I have employees in Mexico on 5 continents helping us out. Glad that you're here, Tracy. Pans and pandas is a great niche. Yes, FDN works in Canada. We're all over Canada. The CEO or COO of our company lives in Canada and has we have one of our labs is in Canada, thank goodness. And they send their kits all over the world. Yeah. So I think I've gone over enough. I have to let the staff go on to their other duties and things. Let me we've had that up there long enough. Stop sharing real quick. We'll do that.
Danielle, yes, the program is self-paced. So it is entirely virtual and all self-paced. Our average time to completion right now is around 9 months. This is people who have full-time jobs, families, all the things. So it can be done faster. It can be done slower.
And I've been graduating people who it only took them 4 months. The only thing that slow you down from zipping through the lessons, which are you can listen to all you want, download them to your phone if you want, and all that. Well, you have to do the labs on yourself. Remember, part of the program is working on yourself. You're going to do the labs on yourself. We're going to consult with you about the results. You're going to see firsthand how an FDN practitioner consults with people and goes over the lab work. Now, I teach you in the course, then you do it on yourself. Then you're going to turn around and play out role play with your mentor so that you get cases handed to you. You'll have worked on what 3 to 5 people before you even graduate. You've already worked on people. So that when you do graduate, hey, the next one you work on is a cash paying customer. Someone is willing to hire you fee for service to run the labs for them and give them a protocol and work with them for a period of time. And we'll help you navigate through all of those relationship building, how you onboard people, how you select clients who are more likely to be successful and follow the recommendations and all of that. All that's included in the course, sort of the business side. And we also have a business school for those real novices. And yes, Andrea, the prices are there somewhere. Just follow that link. If you didn't get it, hopefully you got the QR code, but otherwise we might be able to, we'll take one more minute, Brendan, put a link to the course. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. You read my mind before I even thought of it. Now, by the way, you don't have to pay for it all at once. We do have terms. We carry our own account, so there's no credit check, and you can just make your first payment and get started today if you want. Start today. Matter of fact, it's Halloween. So you can put on your don't put on your white coat and stethoscope. That's not how we work. But you can put on your health detective costume, become a health detective, and get out there and start telling people what you're doing. It's just an amazing profession, is it not, Elizabeth? I know we have to go, but yeah, I want to stay and talk.
FDN is an amazing profession, and I just want to reiterate that we have our own way of doing things. We have a system, we have some phrases that we like. We like to say metabolic chaos, we like to say dress, but we also recognize that each of you in the world is a unique person with a unique expression of healing to offer. And we really honor that here. And our system is made to augment you and the expression of healing that you already are, not to pave over it and change it.
Yes, that's going to be it for today. There's some good. I just looked at Q&A for Ilona Brandt. Listen to yesterday's recording. I talked a lot about flatlined ASIs, and the rest of it. I would say we teach you all the answers to those questions and many, many, many more in the course. It's just an amazing thing. And the reason it's so good isn't just me. Yeah, I did work in offices for 10 years and I figured out a few things. I ran thousands of labs on thousands of people and I figured out a few things along with the amazing mentorship I had. But since I started teaching in 2008, I've interviewed over 2,000 of my graduates and they all get interviewed, about well over 4,000 interviews. But I've done 2,000 of them personally. And what I did was listen very closely as I asked, what could I do to make the course better? I ask other stuff. We get to know each other in your post-grad interview. PGI, we call it post-grad interview. So everyone gets one. I can't wait till you have yours so I can learn more about you personally. But one thing I've done every single time, and please be open and honest with me, my feelings won't get hurt. I just really want to know how to make the course better. So guess what happens when you've been asking people that for 15 years? It got better and better and better and more robust, and it's just really remarkable. Thanks to you guys who've taken it and been honest and fed back to me, because I can't think of everything. I don't even try anymore. It just
And we
goes
keep
well.
adding. We keep adding,
Yeah.
don't we, Reed?
Yeah. So a big part of Elizabeth is, of course, supervisor. She supervises the mentors, but also I think one of your main jobs is working with me to revise the course, continue to update and revise it. We keep it fresh. There's nothing stale or old about it. There's nothing outdated. It's not what they used to do when Reed was practicing in the last century. That's all been updated continuously. Yeah, I started in the last century. I know there's people here who weren't born in the last century. That sounds so old. I might look old, folks, but let me tell you something. So, Toronto, Canada. Lisa's from Toronto, Canada. That was where I was born. Yeah, anyway, let's go. I'm sorry, guys, for keeping you late. See you on Monday.
Thanks everyone for joining. Thank you.